Hey, oh, YouTube. It's I, Shaggy Philolitea. Getting set up to go live again. Do another Spoopyween reading. Hey, Eric, what's up? Hey, Casey. Only been live for 2 minutes, Eric. You took your naps? Glad to hear it, Eric. Glad to hear you're in a good place. Hey, Hunter. From John Keel, Disneyland of the Gods. Chapter Snallygasters and Sea Serpents. Forteans will remember 1973 as the year of the Snallygaster. The word is a corruption of the German term Schnellgeister, meaning quick spirits, and according to Webster's Third New International Dictionary is a mythical, nocturnal creature, half bird and half reptile, chiefly reported in rural Maryland, which preys on children and poultry. Snallygasters have cropped up all over the United States, usually answering to the classic description of the tall, hairy, red-eyed monsters which haunt Lake Worth in Texas, which haunted Lake Worth in Texas a few years ago, and or the giant winged weirdo which plagued West Virginia in 1966-67 and Texas in 1975. As with the legendary Snallygaster of Maryland, these critters leave flocks of dead chickens and dogs in their wake. Where these giant animals come from and where they go remains a mystery. Sheriffs around the country have turned out armed posses complete with bloodhounds and helicopters to hunt them down, always to no avail. In June 1973, there were 6 snallygaster sightings within 2 weeks around the town of Sykesville, Maryland. Witnesses said it was from 7 to 10 feet tall and covered with hair. Hundreds of miles away in Enfield, Illinois, a midget snallygaster baffled authorities. This one was only about 4.5 feet tall and had a grayish colored body and, incredibly, seemed to stand on 3 legs. It thoughtfully left behind some footprints, as did the Sykesville critter. Up in Durham, Maine, local police spent the summer chasing a gorilla, which also left footprints indicating it weighed at least 300 pounds. Gorillas are very rare creatures. Experts estimate there are only 400 gorillas alive in the world today, including those in zoos. No gorilla was reported missing in Maine, so we can assume the Durham animal is just another snallygaster. How extinct is the dinosaur? Again, akin to the snallygaster are the extinct dinosaurs which occasionally wander across farm fields, leaving perfect dinosaur footprints behind. Police in France chased a dinosaur unsuccessfully in the early 1930s. In 1969, a dinosaur is supposed to have turned up in Texas and forced a car off the road. A year later, another dinosaur created a stir in the mountains of Italy. In 1934, a dinosaur allegedly attacked sheep at Campbell Lake in South Dakota and, incidentally, scared the daylights out of some of the farmers living around the lake. Generations of pygmies in the Congo and Africa have allegedly been seeing a large dinosaur-like critter that they call the Mokele Mbembe in a place known as Likuala Swamps. The rumors have inspired innumerable hardy expeditions over the past 50 years. In the past decade alone, groups from Japan, France, England, and Chicago University have fought their way through the jungles in the hopes of getting a glimpse of the monster. These brave would-be explorers suffered incredibly from insect bites, tropical diseases, and chronic humiliation. They usually left their home bases with much fanfare and then later returned from Africa very, very quietly with their tails dragging. Even now, a group of college professors, bright-eyed students, and true believers are preparing for yet another trek to the swamps of the Congo. Strange aerial lights and unidentified flying objects have been sighted in the immediate vicinity of some of these monster sightings, causing some ufologists to speculate that the snallygasters could be visitors from some other planet. But are flying saucers really dumping dinosaurs on us? There is one important common denominator in the majority of our snallygaster dinosaur UFO sightings. They take place near bodies of water, reservoirs, rivers, and lakes. Both UFOs and the tall, hairy monsters seem to frequent swamps, too. The phantom animals could be amphibians who spend most of their time underwater, and the occasional dinosaur sightings could actually be glimpses of the creature which has produced the worldwide lore of sea serpents. Sea serpents and dinosaurs. Paranormal events seem to happen in cycles, and all kinds of crazy things happen at once when these cycles peak. While some people are seeing UFOs and atmospheric phenomena, others are viewing sea serpents and tall, hairy monsters. Outbreaks of ghost and poltergeist cases also seem to coincide with such events. On June 24, 1908, the entire crew of the steamship Livingston reported seeing a 200-foot sea serpent in the Gulf of Mexico. Their story appeared on page 1 of the New York Times on July 1st, 1908. The ship belonged to the Texas-Mexican Line and was making a routine trip between Galveston and Frontera, Mexico. About 50 miles outside of Frontera, the monster appeared off the port bow. Quote, the ship got within 60 feet of the creature, according to the Times, and for 15 minutes stood by while all on board viewed the serpent through the glasses. It was apparently sleeping and was not less than 200 feet long, of about the diameter of a flour barrel in the center of the body, and was not as round. The head was about 6 feet long by 3 feet at the widest part. The color was dark brown, and near its tail were rings or circles that appeared larger in circumference than the body at that point. As it swam away, the tail was erected, and a rattling noise as loud as that made by a Gatling gun in action startled the watchers on the Livingston. As soon as the ship docked in Frontera, the captain, his crew, and 15 passengers signaled a sworn affidavit before Charles Ricklin, the United States consular agent. The late Harold T. Wilkins, a British authority on the unexplained, reportedly saw, quote, 2 remarkable saurians, end quote, in the waters of a stream in Cornwall, England, on July 5th, 1949. The monsters were identical to the ancient long-extinct plesiosaur, Wilkins noted afterward. Could this distant cousin of the dinosaur still be alive and well in Cornwall? There are innumerable other plesiosaur sightings, bulky-bodied creatures with elongated necks that have been seen frequently in Lake Champlain, New York, Lake Catemaco, Mexico, Lake Walker, Nevada, Flathead Lake, Montana, Payette Lake, Idaho, Okanagan Lake, Canada, Lake Iliamna, Alaska, and even in Lake Verota in the Soviet Union. Apparently, the Indians were well aware of these creatures in the earliest times. In Peebles, Ohio, there is a huge man-made mound of earth covering several acres of land. When viewed from the air, this mound assumes the precise shape of our water monsters. The bulky frontal portion, thin neck and long tail square with the land, and long tail square with the land sighting descriptions from Ireland and Scotland. Mr. F.W. Holliday, one of the world's leading experts on sea monsters, has said. He calls the mound probably the best surviving dragon simulation. Land sightings of such animals are rare, but they have been seen waddling into or out of lakes in British Columbia, Canada, and the haunted lakes of Great Britain. Witnesses of these rare overland sojourns seem to be describing the ancient plesiosaur. Scientists eager to explain away the mystery have tried to identify these creatures as everything from giant eels and sea slugs to sea cattle, sea cows, whales, and even overgrown mackerel. Lake mysteries. Northern Scandinavia is dotted with lakes large and small, and there are endless stories about lake monsters like Scotland's Lake Ness monster. But many of these monster reports sound more like submarine sightings. How would submarines manage to reach these remote, often shallow inland lakes? One witness at Bullaren Lake in the province of Bohuslän, Sweden, said, "It looked more like a boat, I would say, yet a boat or a sub can't go in this lake. It had a hump that looked like a glass tower." Mr. Jan Ove Sundberg, a Swedish journalist, has supplied us with several detailed accounts of these alleged lake monsters. The following item appeared in the newspaper Mantala Tidning, July 26, 1950. This is a long quotation. The monster in Lake Rasvalen has appeared again, this time 3 times within 1 hour. A man who was skeptical of the monster report saw it in Calernus Bay, but when he tried to get closer to it, it disappeared. One has got to believe one's own eyes, said Sigvard Barnstrom from Vedabag's book today. The monster was about 5 meters long and looked almost like a black whale or an upside-down boat. I was on the lake together with a friend to look in our nets when we suddenly spotted this strange creature about 300 meters from our boat. When it showed up, we tried to get closer to it, but it submerged in a funny way and disappeared. After a few minutes, the monster appeared again, and this time both men saw that it was no longer than 5 meters, black in color and somewhat round in front and back. The time was 5 a.m. Again, they tried to get closer, and again it disappeared. Around 8 a.m., it turned up again, about 200 meters from the boat, and was in view for about 15 minutes. This time, it circled the lake at terrific speed, Mr. Barnstrom said, unlike any animal I've ever seen. Then it submerged like a submarine. End quote. A thing like an upside-down boat has been seen scooting over the surface of Storzian Lake and Jämtland, too. At Stensian Lake in Östergötland, a witness saw what looked like the conning tower of a submarine jutting about the water. Västerbotten's Tavelsian Lake has also produced reports of an elongated something that behaved like a submarine. And at Vättern Great Lake in Östergötland, witnesses once watched 2 torpedoes about 40 feet long, which submerged abruptly when an airplane flew over. Dragons and discs. Mr. Ted Holliday was an outstanding scholar and researcher who spent many long summers watching the murky waters at Scotland's famous Loch Ness, home of Nessie, the best known of all monsters. In his book, The Dragon and the Disc, Holliday offers some astonishing findings linking the water monsters with flying saucers. In earlier works, e.g. The Great Orm of Lake Ness, Holliday labored to support the notion that Nessie was a real flesh and blood creature capable of being caught. But after digging deeper and deeper into the Nessie lore, he has turned towards the paraphysical theory, the suspicion that the celebrated creature of the loch may be somehow related to the elusive Snallygaster. And revisiting the many churches and monuments throughout England which feature ancient dragon carvings, Holliday was impressed with the fact that such carvings usually included discs and figures which closely resembled modern UFOs. Holliday concluded that earlier peoples recognized there was some connection between the dragons and UFO forms. Even the ancient Chinese on the other side of the world believed that dragons and UFOs were interrelated. Adding to the mystery, all kinds of psychic manifestations have plagued the scientific investigators at Loch Ness. Expensive electronic instruments malfunction, cameras refuse to operate, and strange misfortunes haunt the investigators. There have even been mystery men, or men in black, episodes. After returning to Sweden, one journalist was approached by a stranger in a restaurant who sternly advised him to discontinue his research into UFOs and sea serpents. Photographing the unknown. The strongest evidence for the reality of UFOs are the numerous radar sightings recorded over the years. Nessie has been picked up on radar's underwater equivalent, sonar. In fact, some sonar readings have indicated that several of these creatures are frolicking in the mile-deep lake. Yet, like the flying saucers which appear and disappear just as suddenly from the radar scopes, these herds of monsters are elusive and scientifically impossible. If the herds come to the loch to breed, one popular theory, what do they feed on? Such huge animals must have prodigious appetites and could quickly upset the ecological balances of the lake. And why haven't any of the old-timers died and floated to the surface? There have been about 3,000 known sightings of Nessie in this century, but photographs are extremely rare and controversial. Other monsters are equally camera-shy. California's Bigfoot and Canada's Sasquatch, both Snallygaster types, have avoided posing for their portrait for years. No one ever succeeded in filming West Virginia's Mothman, a 7-foot red-eyed creature with wings, and even authenticated UFO photos are rare in relation to the many thousands of sightings annually. Why are these things so difficult to photograph? Author Holliday suggests that Nessie is somehow tied in with the mysterious psychic world around us. It may even be that the creature is somehow being protected by unknown psychic forces. Each summer, teams of scientists and investigators man cameras mounted around Loch Ness. These cameras are positioned to cover almost the entire surface of the lake. Almost, but not quite. There are a few blind spots. In August 1968, Holliday was present when Nessie reared his ugly head for a look around. Though there were a number of good witnesses along the shore, Nessie chose to pop up in one of the very few places that were obscured from the various cameras. Quote, the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau had a camera truck at Quarry Brae, Holliday reports, and another one 4 miles away at Tor Point. The observers were watchful and keen, but they had seen nothing. The phenomenon had concealed itself, so there was nothing for them to see. End quote. Eager UFO photographers the world over have been puzzled when their expensive cameras failed to function at the critical moment, returning to normal as soon as the UFO had soared out of view. Holliday cites a number of instances in which this same effect has occurred at Loch Ness. In some cases, the cameras seemed to work, but the developed film came out completely blank. This, too, has happened to UFO photographers, and snallygaster chasers, and ghost hunters. Sea serpents from outer space. Whenever we fail to uncover solid evidence to support our observations of paranormal phenomenon, we tend to indulge in fanciful speculation. After chasing flying saucers for 40 years, we find we have no more real evidence than when we began, so we decide preemptively that they are spaceships from outer space. Since humming, buzzing, multicolored UFOs hang around the lakes and rivers inhabited by our plesiosaur and his relatives, and the swamps and woodlands frequented by our snallygaster, it should be obvious that all these things share a common cause. No one seriously contends that sea serpents are visited from some other planet. Rather, it is becoming more evident that all unexplained phenomena are connected in some inexplicable fashion. Some could be tricks of time, with the monsters and dinosaurs popping into our time zone temporarily. Some could be pure hallucination. The reality of these things is not only unproven and unprovable, but the integration and logical, objective study of all these matters has been made impossible by the intrusion of belief. Loch Ness investigators sneer at the whole subject of UFOs. Ufologists ignore snallygaster reports. Psychical researchers are so busy hunting ghosts, they have little time for flying saucers and monsters, although all these subjects produce the same effects. In the past few years, however, a handful of investigators have begun to try to view the whole scene rather than isolated fragments of it. One of Britain's leading ufologists, Brinsley Lepour French, now admits there is some considerable evidence that the UFOs appearing in our skies have some connections with psychic phenomena. The helicopters vainly chasing dinosaurs, the posses tracking down 10-foot gorillas, the hordes of teenagers sitting on hilltops and scanning skies for flying saucers, and the patient cameraman shivering in the cold night air at Loch Ness are all engaged in the same pursuit, but they don't know it. Phantom boatmen. Legends dating back to the year 1456 describe an underwater connection between Lake Massarpogalen and Lake Ixningen in Östergötland, Sweden. According to researcher Leonard Carlson, Lake Massarpogalen is surrounded by a dense forest and is only about 300 feet wide and 600 feet long. People vacationing at the lake have claimed that it sometimes lights up, as if the waters were illuminated from below, with a strong reddish color. This phenomenon was last observed in July 1972. Carlson and Sundberg report the people in the lake area claim they have seen a mystery boat on Lake Massarpogalen. In the boat were two figures resembling human beings. Sometimes on dark nights the boat and figures disappeared with a sharp, blinding light. The mystery boat seems to be an old legend come true, as local inhabitants claimed to have observed it many years ago. There are fish in the lake, but nobody in the area knows who the figures in the mystery boat are, where they keep their boat, or where they are from. They just seem to disappear into thin air." End quote. Disappearing boats and phantom boatmen are no strangers to collectors of Forteana. There is also a growing body of lore about mysterious frogmen who climb out of small lakes and inlets in full diving gear, waddle ashore, and get into waiting black Cadillacs to drive off into limbo. The late Ivan T. Sanderson was particularly concerned with stories like those recounted here, and he collected many others. such as the mysterious voices and music heard by divers deep in the water off the shores of Great Britain. He speculated that strange things may be happening at the bottom of our oceans, lakes, rivers, and fjords, while all the UFO enthusiasts are looking eagerly in the wrong direction, to space. The real secret of these phenomena may be as earthbound or waterbound as we are. When the great flying saucer wave of October 1973 occurred, the case that received the most publicity was the story of the two fishermen in Pascagoula, Mississippi, who were allegedly taken aboard a UFO while fishing in Mississippi's famous Singing River, so named because for years the river has produced a mysterious humming sound like the buzzing of trees, a sound which has long been associated with UFOs. Flying saucers have demonstrated a penchant for bodies of water, diving into rivers and reservoirs around the world. The majority of the best known UFO contacts have taken place on beaches and river banks. Mysterious marsupials. In July 1975, another old friend popped up near Duquesne, Illinois. Several people reported seeing a kangaroo about 5 feet tall hopping through cornfields. Kevin Ludy said he was hesitant to report his sighting at first because I thought everyone would think I was crazy. There have been many kangaroo reports from Illinois in recent years. One witness was a police officer who gave chase, but, of course, soon lost the trail. As usual, local authorities checked nearby zoos and circuses only to learn that no one had lost a kangaroo. A decade ago, a kangaroo was bouncing around the New England states and even turned up in Ohio. In fact, there are periodic kangaroo flaps in the United States, and it all suggests that there are several kangaroos living unnoticed in the American countryside. The Macropus gigantus grows to about 5 feet tall and can leap 25 feet in a single bound. Some of our agile leaping monsters, which are usually seen in the dark, could be one of these renegade kangaroos. Like elephants, they are timid fellows unless they're cornered. Then they can disable a big man in seconds with their vicious four-toed claws. A number of other odd animals live wild in the U.S. Years ago, a movie company lost some chimpanzees while filming a Tarzan epic in Florida. The chimps are still seen occasionally and have undoubtedly grown and multiplied over the years. Some skeptics try to blame them for the sightings of Florida's famous smelly Sandman, the southern counterpart of the great Sasquatch of the Northwest. However, the Sandman is much larger than a chimp, is accompanied by a foul odor, and, like monsters everywhere, is fond of chasing automobiles and haunting popular love lanes. Back in 1949, Ivan T. Sanderson was sent by NBC to Florida to track down reports of a giant creature that had been seen roaming along riverbanks. Sanderson concluded after studying eyewitness reports that the thing had been a 15-foot tall penguin. The king penguin can reach a height of 4 feet, but there have been vague, unverified reports of a much larger type isolated on frigid, uninhabited islands in Antarctica. Sanderson speculated that one of these creatures, which are said to be covered with fur rather than feathers, somehow got caught in an ocean current, which eventually deposited it in Florida. Kangaroos in Illinois, wild chimps and giant penguins in Florida, wild monkeys have even been shot and killed in Tennessee. Back in 1967, police in New Jersey shot and killed a huge Himalayan brown bear, a very rare creature found in only a few zoos. No one has ever managed to explain how a Himalayan bear appeared in New Jersey. Ridiculous reptiles. When I returned from India, I brought back a 2-headed sand boa and 3-fanged cobras. Herpetology, the study of reptiles, has been a hobby of mine since I was a boy. To promote a book I had written, my publisher ensconced me in the window of a store in Times Square where I did a daily snake charming act. Later, I traveled around the country lecturing about Oriental magic and giving demonstrations with my snakes. People were always coming up to me after my talks to tell me of their own incredible experiences with snakes right here in America. To hear them tell it, one would think this country is overrun with 30-foot boa constrictors, giant alligators, and other bizarre reptiles. 2 tales that I heard over and over again, usually the teller said he had heard about it from a friend who knew the witness involved and was very reliable, concerned the legendary hoop snake and the milk snake. When frightened, the hoop snake is supposed to take its tail in its mouth, form a hoop, and roll away at great speed. The milk snake is said to approach cows and suck all the milk from their udders. Neither of these snakes actually exists, but stories about them can be found in ancient literature, and the myths were probably brought to this country by early immigrants and passed down from generation to generation ever since. I've heard about flying snakes in the US, but so far as I know, none has ever been caught. There really are flying snakes in Venezuela and Asia. They lurk in trees, and when their lunch strolls past, they flatten their ribs and spiral down like a stream of confetti. Stories of unusual poisonous snakes also abound, he means venomous. There are actually only two snakes in the world that are aggressive enough to chase a man. They are the black mamba of Africa, a member of the cobra family, and the bushmaster of Central America. Both are very ugly customers, and their bites are nearly always fatal. Natives claim that the only way to escape either of them is to run uphill, if there are no hills around. Perhaps the strangest snakebite story of all occurred in Kenton, Ohio, on June 9, 1946. Mr. Orland Packer was horseback riding near his home when a giant snake appeared suddenly in his path. He said it was about 8 feet long and 4 inches in diameter. The horse threw him, and the snake coiled around his leg, breaking his ankle and biting him in the heel. Then it bit the horse and slithered off into the woods and vanished. A huge search party combed the woods but never found it. The snake was described as having a flat head and a diamond shape on its back. It was definitely not one of our run-of-the-mill Ohio snakes. Years later, I mentioned the Packer incident in one of my books, and I was surprised to receive a letter from Mrs. Packer outlining her husband's horrible ordeal. His wound refused to heal, she wrote, and he finally had to have part of his heel amputated. He was on crutches for almost 2 years. His fever would rise till he would almost go out of his head. Then, after he broke out in sweats where you could wring water out of his clothes, I ranged his bed several times a day. So I know. I sniffed. I sifted through all my reptile books trying to identify the culprit. Although the basic description sounds like a king cobra, Packer would have died within hours if that had been the case. The horse survived, but lost a patch of hair where the snake had bitten it. Packer suffered agonies for years afterward. There is nothing in my snake's catalogs that could explain this incident. The bite of the notorious bushmaster injects a substance which causes the blood to lose its ability to coagulate. Some bushmaster victims find their pores opening up and oozing blood when they enter the final stage before death. Packer's inability to heal suggests a similar kind of venom. In any case, you don't have to go off on an African safari or join an expedition into central Brazil to see rare and exotic creatures. The United States is still populated with a wide variety of peculiar wildlife, ranging from West Virginia's spectacular Mothman and occasional reports of ancient pterodactyls on the winged kangaroos, Himalayan bears, and ridiculous reptiles. Several U.S. lakes are supposed to contain giant sea serpents, and from the reports that pour into my mailbox each year, our woods seem to be filled with huge, hairy monsters. Ugh. End of chapter. Would either of you like to comment before I move on? Nessie is in Mario 64. Nessie is the most well-known of all of the cryptid monsters, for sure. They don't really call them monsters anymore. They call them cryptids because monsters indicate that they're scary and or trying to hurt us or they might take an interest in wanting to hurt us, and that doesn't seem to be the case with most of them. But the idea that they would be friendly to us being in their environments is probably not true. Alright, that was only half an hour. It's just me and Eric. It's great to have you, Eric. Love you being here, buddy. Love your dedication to the channel. It means a lot to me. I like you too, Eric. We are right at halfway. So, we continue. Skyquakes and HITIs. I don't remember what HITI stands for. High Impact Telegraph Institutions. I don't remember. That's not what it is. I know it's not that. In October 1976, I, John Keel, was pecking away at a typewriter in the Foreign Press Office in Stockholm, Sweden, when the entire city was suddenly shaken by a mammoth explosion. Windows rattled and objects rolled off tables. Local newspapermen besieged the airports and military with queries. Strangely, nothing had exploded in the area, and the authorities had no idea what had happened. Various rumors circulated, the most popular being that a Soviet submarine base had suffered a disaster hundreds of miles away on the other side of the Baltic. A few days later, another violent blast shook Oslo, Norway, and, like the Stockholm explosion, seemed to occur somewhere in the upper atmosphere without leaving a trace. Skyquakes are a relatively common phenomenon, but only a handful of Forteans were researching the subject until December 1977, when a series of mysterious aerial blasts shook the Atlantic seaboard. Overnight, a wide variety of scientists and self-styled experts embraced the subject, and President Carter ordered the U.S. Air Force to investigate. One scientist widely quoted in the press actually proposed that the explosions were caused by bubbles of methane gas coming up through fissures in the ocean's bottom. Methane gas. That's swamp gas, folks. The explanation is even more unlikely than the phenomenon itself. Actually, these mysterious blasts have been occurring in the Northeast for many years, and there are legends of phantom artillery going back several centuries. The most famous account is the Barisal guns of India. British colonists frequently heard the inexplicable booms around Bengal. Others reported similar aerial blasts in the West Indies, around Haiti, and in far-off Central Australia. Lake Bosumtwi, Africa, and Luni in Ireland were also frequently visited by the mysterious cannons. The Indians in the Black Hills of South Dakota have legends about the explosions, and the Lewis and Clark expedition is supposed to have heard the phenomenon in the Rocky Mountains. Lake Seneca, one of the Finger Lakes in New York State, has a long history of airquakes, as the newspapers of 1977 dubbed the sounds. The gas bubble theory was already old hat in 1897 and was generally discredited by witnesses who reported the lake was frozen over at the times of the blasts. On December 2nd, 1977, a skyquake jarred the residents of New Canaan, Connecticut, and was accompanied by strange lights in the sky. The aerial sounds followed a course that led southwards over New Jersey to the Carolinas, suggesting that some object had passed along that route into the famous Bermuda Triangle. Military authorities and aviation officials staunchly denied that any supersonic aircraft were operating in those areas at the time. Back in 1952, when supersonic craft were still limited to a few experimental models, officialdom carried out the same exercise in futility. Residents of Long Island, just east of New York City, were plagued that year by skyquakes, and the only news person to take any interest was the late Dorothy Kilgallen. She tried to find out if any military authority knew the cause and was given the usual runaround. Like flying saucers, skyquakes were a non-subject, and the authorities reasoned that if we didn't pay any attention to them, they would just go away. The sobering truth is that skyquakes are on the increase. They tend to occur when UFO sightings increase, and they follow the general patterns of the UFO phenomenon. It is possible that skyquakes are produced by the rapid transit of unidentified flying objects. There is no known atmospheric condition that could cause them, and the 100-year-old scientific explanation that bubbles of gas are the culprits is insupportable. There are two major UFO routes. There are two major UFO channels or belts on this planet. One lies 60 degrees north and indicates that a great deal of unobserved UFO activity has been taking place north of the Arctic Circle since 1840. The second channel stretches north to south along 65 to 75 degrees west from Canada to Argentina. This belt includes some of the busiest and most mysterious places on Earth, such as the Bermuda Triangle in the Atlantic and the baffling area around Bahia Blanca, Argentina, site of some of the strangest UFO cases. We could list scores of peculiar events along this belt from New England to the Carolinas. For example, at 8:15 p.m. on the night of April 25, 1966, a spectacular meteor passed along the channel. The brilliantly illuminated object was seen by thousands of people in several states. A number of amateur photographers managed to snap pictures of it. In Pennsylvania, there were cases in which witnesses claimed their automobile engine stalled inexplicably as the object passed over. After cruising over South Carolina, the same thing disappeared southwards over the Atlantic. At exactly the same time, exactly on the opposite side of the Earth, in the Tashkent region of the Soviet Union, a violent earthquake struck, killing 10 and leaving 200,000 people homeless. How strange that a major disaster would strike on one side of the world while thousands of people on the other side were viewing an awesome meteor. Could the two events have been somehow related? Eerie lights and aerial phenomenon have been observed before, and during major earthquakes in many parts of the world. But the strange lights and skyquakes of December 1977 were not accompanied by earthquakes. However, the path of the skyquakes did follow the same route as the meteor of 1966. The 65 to 75 degree west channel, the meteor traveled in silence, indicating it was high above the atmosphere. A natural object entering the atmosphere over New England would make a noise, but it would be in a retrograde orbit and would probably burn up or hit the ground before it traveled as far south as the Carolinas. Any object traveling at supersonic speed and thus leaving a stream of sonic booms in its wake would have to be under some kind of control to cover such a great distance. So if the skyquakes were caused by an object, we can conclude it was a controlled object, which was flying rather than falling. There is nothing in nature that we know of which would be capable of producing a series of sonic booms over an area of 1,000 miles or more. The aviation authorities have assured us that no man-made aircraft was responsible for the noises. So we are left with an unidentified phantom aircraft which presumably entered the 65 to 75 degree west channel over New England and soared southwards into the Bermuda Triangle. It must have been a very special unidentified, because many UFOs have been clocked by radar and theodolites in our atmosphere and traveled at supersonic speeds without creating sonic booms. Indeed, most UFOs travel in total silence. A UFO that leaves sonic booms in its wake must be unique. So unique that the noises might mean it was not what we now call a flying saucer. The correlation between the meteor of 1966 and the Tashkent earthquake suggests that some other force is at work here. It could be geological, some environmental force that is affected by geological changes. The light seen during earthquakes could be a product of that force, a form of static electricity generated by the movements of the Earth's crust. Skyquakes could be implosions rather than explosions, caused by the rush of wear into holes or empty pockets in the atmosphere. Such holes might be caused by geophysical changes, or they could be created when a solid object suddenly disappears and the air rushes into the space it had occupied. There are countless reports of UFOs disappearing suddenly, often accompanied by a loud retort. So, what causes our earthquakes? They seem to be somehow related to UFO phenomenon, yet the observational evidence precludes a UFO explanation. What they are, what causes them, and what they mean all remain mysteries. Ironically, the skyquakes of December 1977 led the media to rediscover them and give them a new credibility. They suddenly became a subject, even though they have been shattering the peace and quiet of the countryside for hundreds of years. After President Carter recognized their existence, the boondoggling began. Government agencies doled out fat contracts to universities to investigate. After several years of such expensive investigations, we were offered new variations on the tired old swamp gas theory, and whatever or whoever is behind the airquakes continued to rattle our windows with impunity, and I am barely able to keep my eyes open any longer. This chapter probably has more than just one page. Uh, I can't do it. I don't want to do it. I can't keep my eyes open. So, I'm gonna go to bed now. I love you guys. Um, Thank you, Eric, for being here. Thank you, whoever the other person is. Thank you for the 5 likes. That was Spoopyween. I'm going to bed. Have a good night.